Hello soul friends, this is Miriam and welcome back to my channel. Today's pick a card reading is about what your shadow wants to tell you today. So what about your shadow at this point is working for you? Shadow work, if you don't know what it is, I'm gonna say just Google it real quick because otherwise I feel like I'm gonna rehash information that a lot of people already know. Basically it's just taking your negative traits in your personality, your darker self, and figuring out how it actually serves your lighter self and the overall package of you. Okay, so how is your shadow working for you right now? So remember, no matter your individual beliefs, tarot or oracle reading is your spirit guides coming forward to give you advice, or it is just your subconscious mind helping you answer life's ponders. And no matter how you look at that, it is healthy and you are in the right place. So today we're just going to do one card each. So it might be a shorter reading, although I've seen me go off on, 25 minutes on one card before. And so have you, if you've been here before. But I think we're just going to do the one and just see how that handles me. So we'll see. We're going to use this deck. As far as your piles that you have to choose from, we have little heart stones. For group one, we have this little, kind of black and red, and I don't know what it is. It almost looks like one of the black stones that people see a lot of, like obsidian, but it's got like jasper in it, but I don't even know if that can be a thing because I know nothing about rocks, right, or crystals or gemstones, or even what the difference between all of them is. This is like a little snowy quartz, I bet, though, for group two. Banded something, I bet, right? This might be onyx and mixed with like banded. Is there a banded onyx? I don't know, y'all. Clear quartz, I know what this one is. All right, so group 4 is clear quartz. Group 3 is this little black and white stripy stone. Okay, with this cute little, it's got like a little mole on its top, a birthmark. Okay, we will see you in your individual readings. Bye. Hello, group 1. So if you pick the little black and red stone heart, this will be your card showing how your shadow is working for you. So the best way to tell if you're in the right pile with these is to be aware of what your shadow attributes are. They might be, a little bit unknown to you, and that might make it a little more difficult, but it should start making sense, I think, if I'm doing this right. If I'm not, then I'll just never upload this video again, or ever. Okay, we have Coming of Winter, number 11. It comes in lullabies, deep within your mirrored flesh. Alas, it is time to lay your quivering chest upon the winter's coming. All right, I'm just going to be honest with you all right now. I absolutely hate that word. They're like, which one, Miriam? This one. One with the Q. Hate it. And for whatever reason, for the last 3 weeks, it's just been following me around. I have heard it on TV. It's popping up in my cards. It's just one of those words that made you uncomfortable in junior high, and then it just never stopped making you uncomfortable. Okay, so with the winter card, what I'm seeing with this is one of your shadow attributes could be that you do not like change, that you don't like things to come to an end, that you don't like adjusting to new things. And it's almost to the point where you'll kind of go out of your way to keep it from happening if you can help it. Okay. And so to me, it's not just, even though we're doing this right before winter in real time, I'm not going to hold you accountable for you hating winter. And that's the only reason why you're here. Okay. You might hate winter. And I think there are some people here that might just be, sorry, get my earbuds out of there. Those aren't our totem for the day. Earbuds anyway. Keep us protected. This is our totem for right now, just in case you were wondering. You can't ever see them on camera, but I usually have some kind of little statue or something here. But anyway, I digress. It's there's something about how she's hiding this little sprig of stuff behind her back. You know, I just feel like she's trying really hard not to have to gear up for what that is. So like whether it's the season itself just depresses you no end, which that happens to a lot of people. I just don't happen to be one of them because I like winter time, but I understand how it feels when you don't. Like if you live in a place where you have like 10-month winters and there's 50 feet of snow everywhere, I could see that wearing on me after a while. You know, so I get it. No judgments. No hating on people that like, you know, or hate different seasons. I'm not one of those guys. But I feel like it also could have to do with not just the weather sucking, but also like for some of you, I feel like it might just be that time of year is rough for you. Okay. And don't worry, this is not the whole reading. I'm just kind of like giving you guys some like insight on how you might know you're in the right pile. I also feel like for some of you, you feel shut in. For others, I feel like because she's looking out of her house, that some of you do kind of stay solitary and indoors, even when it's not winter time. So I almost feel like the main thing that seems to be bothersome to your shadow attribute is this change aspect of like not liking things to change from where they were, especially if things are going really well. And especially if the change is somewhat unknown. And part of like with the coming of winter is that we never know what winter is going to bring other than bad weather, right? And sickness sometimes. And so your guides are kind of showing that because you have that fear of change and you don't want to like keep changing things, like the shadow attribute of that is like, well, you're not accepting that change is inevitable, right? Or you're not accepting that, you know, nothing can stay the same. You can't relive the past, to quote Gatsby, etc., right? Well, to quote the book Gatsby. Gatsby didn't say that. Of course he didn't say that. But that being said, sorry, I heard one of my cats yelping. It's okay, Luna. It's Sully. He's downstairs. You're all right. So anyway, it's like what I feel like is working for you with that, and what the good positive attribute of that is that you, because you don't like change as much as other people and actually kind of feel like it brings bad things, you are one of those people that are going to retain tradition and retain loyalty to certain things, right? Like certain ideas, certain people, certain beliefs, right? Whereas others, a lot of times are like, change is inevitable, just move on. But yet at the same time, like they aren't looking at the changes that are being made. So like one of the things that like people have like said to me before, like change happens. It's just the way it is. And it's like, okay, yeah, change happens and that's just the way it is. But that doesn't exclude the fact that committing crimes against people is upsetting. Yes, that crime might have changed that person's life, but being like, well, that's change and it's inevitable. I know that's an extreme example, but I'm just doing that to put it into perspective. Like, it still sucks, right? Even if it changes you for the better. And so I feel like that's your attribute, is that you preserve. You preserve what's important. You preserve things that are dear to you, and you hang on to it. The other thing that I like about this that your guides are showing me is that because you know that things do inevitably change, I don't see you like dysfunctionally like holding on to the past. I really don't. I think it's more just uncomfortable for you, and inside you're groaning, no, you know, or however this is affecting you. It's just this groaning of, I don't want to deal with this. The fact that you are not wanting that to happen, it also shows that you really cherish how things are for you now, that you actually put a lot of gratitude into what you have going on in the now. And that's a very healthy way to live, my soul friends, because all we have is right now. That's what everybody tells me in therapy or something like that. My therapist doesn't talk like that. And I was not mocking her when I did that. She's amazing. But anyway, lots of people say it. So I feel like you are also discerning in that you don't just blindly think like, well, change is going to happen. It doesn't matter. Okay. Sometimes, yes, change is inevitable and it's always going to happen. But that doesn't mean that just every time somebody says, we're going to change this, that it's a good idea. Right. And I think you know that. And so I feel like you actually might bring some balance to the table of like, oh, I always picture so many people that are in education must watch this channel, or I just project my like past experiences onto you. I'm sorry if this sounds a little bit different. I had to put my earbuds in. So, now I can't remember what I was saying. It's like you bring balance to the table of saying that it's not always right to just change. And so when you bring that balance, you actually kind of give insight into like, this is what was working before. And this is why I would like it not to change. Okay. I also feel like it helps you cherish the moment that you're in, such as like enjoying spring and summer and fall more, whichever your favorites are, right? That you enjoy those more and put everything you have into them because you like winter so little, right? And we can apply that to other situations that aren't so blatantly drawn out on the card. You might not seek out new friends. You are most likely not somebody who would cheat on a partner. You might not be someone who would likely take somebody for granted. It seems like more like you actually kind of hold things that are dear to you close. And so that is the light side of that shadow aspect. So if you take that and like, because it's not, I don't feel like this is actually affecting you other than like your mood and just how you feel about the world at this time, even if this isn't about this season and it's about something else changing in your life. Okay. I feel like you aren't going to get mired down in negative thinking to the point where you're going to like cause damage to yourself or need like advice on how to like navigate forward. What I think your guides are just trying to tell you is to help reframe it in your brain a little bit better so that it doesn't affect your mood so much. So like, for example, if I do something really embarrassing, like I fall on my face in front of everyone and go, oh, that was horrible. I fell on my face in front of everyone. It was so embarrassing. I could reframe that by like, so many people tried to help and were genuinely concerned, and not focus on the ones that laughed and were like, ha ha, I fell on your face, you idiot. Right. It also helps you kind of focus on the positive, like, thank God I didn't get hurt, like it could have been so much worse. Thank goodness nobody was underneath me when I fell, or I would have like injured them worse from them breaking my fall. Something along those lines. If I fall on people, I feel bad because even though I'm a tiny person, I'm stout and I'm pokey. So like, I feel like it would be like falling, having like a little thing of bricks, falling on you with like sharp corners. And you're like, this is way more uncomfortable than I thought it was going to be. Anyway. Yeah. And I see that it's like number 11, isn't that one of the numerologies for change? I'm not a numerologist. That's why I'm asking. I really need to get into that more because numerology is something that I actually see making a lot of sense, but whatever. So it's basically you are doing just fine. You just need to reframe your thoughts about it. So instead of saying, oh, winter's going to suck, I hate it so much, I don't know, either plan about the next season's being even better, focusing on the things that are still the same that you love, right? And maybe taking the things that you feel like are going away with that change, and I'm not just talking about the season, and adding your own little unchanged spices to it. I know that doesn't quite make sense all the way without an example, and I can't quite think of one right now, but it's like this idea of being able to move forward with the change and accept it, but also bring things, okay, so for example, we'll use the weather thing again, bringing in like a sun lamp or something to help you with those dark times, getting a snowmobile to plow your driveway so that you don't have to shovel anymore, hiring some kid with a snowplow to come plow your driveway so you don't have to shovel anymore. You know, just different ways of like reframing that so that it doesn't just feel so miserable that things are changing. Like say you're moving and you don't want to leave your home. You know, how are you going to make that home have a piece of your old home energy? Those types of reframings. And that's really all I have for you, just reframing your thought process a little bit. You are easy shadows. Today, you might have some darker shadows, but this one's not too bad. All right, that's all I have for you, Group 1. If this was helpful, tell me how in the comments section. You can give me topic ideas there as well. If you would like to book a private reading with me, there are ways to do so in the description box. We will see you in the next one. Bye. Hello, Group 2. So if you pick the little snowy heart, it's probably a quartz, but don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on the quartz. Let's see what's going on with your shadow. Elders, number 15, birthed from seed within the belly of the moon. They are the wise, felt touches over our hearts and felt touches over our hearts and felt deep within the marrow of our spirits. I've gotten this card before in videos, probably the first time I ever read that correctly, and I still didn't do it the first time. So with this card overall, I feel like some of you, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, like, even if you're an older person, I feel like some of you have this attribute of disliking the idea of old age. Okay. And like, I feel that happens for, you know, a few different reasons. It feels like, you know, we don't want to lose our gorgeous looks, right? We don't want to lose our vitality. We don't want to like change to the point where people, I absolutely like, and I've done it. I've done this, you know, like, especially when I was like a lot younger, or like, I really do it with TV even now, like where you're watching like TV and you're like, oh, that actress is so old. Look at her. Oh, and like really like, she's a stunning, beautiful woman, like, and was her whole life, but just because she doesn't look like she did in that first movie I saw her in, I'm like, oh, she's going downhill so fast. And like, I hear people make that comment quite a bit. And it's like that I think, oh man, I don't want anybody to say that about me. And they will. So it's like, I feel like there's some of that. But what it feels like more to me is that like, you don't like elderly people maybe. And I'm not going to give you a hard time for that. Like, I totally was raised to respect my elders and that good stuff. But just because a person is much older than you does not make them a good person that's worthy of your respect. And so while it is kind of like a good idea to be respectful to elderly people in the sense of like, you know, their bodies are not as nimble and quick as they used to be, that sometimes they might need help or they might need some consideration, or you might want to let them ahead of you in the line because, you know, they've already waited in line a million times for someone else, or they are, you know, that kind of deal. But I feel like not all elderly people, but a lot of elderly people that are like the more negative type elderly, like the judgmental type, the it's my way or no way is okay, and the people that don't do it that way are just idiots, you know. The world's going to heck in a handbasket, right? And nobody, you know, you dang kids are ruining, your generation's ruining everything. And I'm like, you raised us, so what's your excuse? You know, that kind of thing. So I get that. I get it from both sides because, you know, I've met both kinds of elderly people and was raised around that kind that you don't like, you know, and I get it because when I was younger, before I became an older person, I was like, I hate old people. They're so mean. They're so mean and judgmental and uptight, and like they can't accept things have changed and yada yada. And I feel like that is valid to a certain extent without going too extreme with it. Like if you're making an observation on people's bad behavior that's true, like don't stop doing that, you know. But the fact is how it affects you in your spiritual journey, right? So your shadow aspect is that you know, you're a little ageist. when it comes to elderly people. Even to the point where I'm just kidding. I don't think there's such a thing as you being ageist. I don't think you're an ageist, but I think that probably there might be times where you feel that way because of how somebody acted, right? And you're like, why are they like that all the time? And so how does that work for you as a shadow attribute? Well, one thing that came to mind immediately when I saw the card, and like this is actually what ran through my head, I was like, they don't like elderly people because of the like negative ways that are like stereotypical that elderly people can act. And it does become kind of like, oh, hang on. Okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying, I have no idea because I just left for a minute and did a whole nother reading with somebody. But what I feel like is that this shadow attribute of yourself is actually a good thing in the sense that you are going to be a cooler older person. Like you're not going to turn into that stereotype behavior that, you know, like the judgmental. You're not going to be judgmental. You're not going to start hating younger people. And like maybe you just like younger people right now, you know, like maybe you're, you know, in your 20s or 30s and you can't stand like little kids being around or something like that. Or maybe you're like, you know, closer to my age and you can't stand teenagers. Maybe you're a teenager and you can't stand teenagers. That wouldn't be a first. So it's like, but I feel like because you have been critical of that you won't live up to that stereotype as you get older. And I feel like if getting older bothers you in that way that we were talking about at the beginning of the reading, that you will be much less bothered by being elderly, because when you rock that attitude, you're going to be much more enlightened. You're going to be more open to those around you. And I get it, because sometimes elderly people, and I could see myself doing this. I see myself doing it now as I get older. And when I was teaching, you start realizing there's like a gap between, you know, what you're doing. So like when you first start teaching, you know, you can tell them like things about modern culture right now that like they actually can relate to and understand if it's towards their age group. But then the older you get and the less you start like keeping up on like the younger kids' stuff, right? Because you're not, you know, you're not in your 20s anymore teaching, right? You're like now in your 30s and your 40s. Like you start not understanding what they're doing, right? And like you can adjust to it to a certain extent, but there's some things you can't adjust to, right? And that's just what we call like the age gap. It happens. And after you get, once the gap gets so wide in like the education field, like it might get to the point where they stop making sense to you. You know, they stop being fun. They start looking like they're ruining the world, and you start feeling like they are ruining. I'm starting to sound like all those elderly people I didn't like when I was younger, right? Like, and I've caught myself doing that, you know, working with young people quite a bit, and consequently being around a lot of older people over the course of my life. I've gotten both those sides of feeling that way. And so I totally understand what you're saying. It is. Elderly people do kind of get angry, and I understand why they do. You know, the values that were sometimes beaten into them are suddenly just like, oh, that's bad and nobody wants to do that anymore. And it's like, oh, well, that's great because that's what I had to do. You know, and I actually, you know, was conditioned into thinking that's the way it was supposed to be. And so now all of a sudden everybody's saying that I'm bad for feeling that way. So it's like, it's not like it's anybody's fault. It's just like how things happen. And because of the way that you were treated by older people over the course of your life, it created this feeling of, you know, not like they're all like that, but just like, oh, I don't want to get like that, right? I don't want to turn into that. And the good news is that you won't, because you are so critical of that behavior. And once you realize you're in that age bracket, you're going to be like, I am not living up to any of those stereotypical bad characteristics that I've seen in others in that group. You know, I'm going to be, you know, like I've heard a lot of women say like, I'm not just going to start dressing like my mother and grandmother did, right? I'm not just going to start hating on young people because I don't think their music sounds good. You know, that's what older people did to me. And like, let me tell you, man, you want to talk about getting older and the music not making sense anymore. Woof. I started getting that at a very early age, and it was just because like you get to a point where you get into your music type that you like, usually probably in adolescence, right? And then in like early adulthood is when you really start to refine your tastes. And like, I don't know, you start to refine your tastes, and then you realize that the stuff you liked back then, maybe you don't like all of it anymore, you know. But then you also start hearing new stuff come out, and like some of it is like a whole new kind of music, right? So for me in my life cycle, it was like the music went from like that that 80s, there was like weird disco stuff, right? That was like before I was born. And then the 80s had like, I don't know, 80s music. And so I didn't like that music when I was younger because it lacked darkness, I guess, right? I felt like it was all too happy, or it was all too, I remember saying like, it's either they're falling in love or they're breaking up, and that's all it is, and how they feel about it. And I don't care about that. Well, part of that was because I'd never been in love, so I couldn't relate to it. The other part was that I just didn't like the type of music it was. It was the music, and maybe the way the lyrics were formed that was just not my jam. And so when the alternative music that was like more like rock started coming out, I really got into that. I also really got into like a lot of the older music that my parents liked in like the 60s. Okay. So, and the reason I liked it is because they weren't just singing about love and the usual things, the stereotypical things that I heard during 80s music. Do I now know that not all 80s music was like that? Yes. Is there some 80s music that I still like? Yes. Okay. But once I realized that there was other kinds of music that were more catered to my jam, then I started getting really heavy into that. So then when it changed, and the change that I saw that was like, oh, I don't like that as much, it got more centered onto like pop culture again. And it wasn't 80s. It was like a new kind, right? There's a lot more R&B mixed in with it. Just like there was more R&B mixed into the rock that I liked, which I love. What I didn't like or understand as much was like the synthesizers, the auto-tune, the way the music sounds itself, like less emphasis on like actual like musical instruments and more on, I don't know, whatever they use to make music now when it's not an instrument. Because I don't even know what computers. I don't know. See, I'm out of the loop because I'm old. And so when I hear the kids listening to that stuff, especially when I was a teacher, I was like, ugh, this is miserable. But I didn't like old people being like, that music you listen to is garbage, you little whippersnapper, you better get it together, right? When I was a kid. So it's not like I ever went out of my way to be like, you guys' music sucks. Like, you should be ashamed. My music was so much better. You guys ever heard of Nirvana? I would never do that. And so even though I don't like the music that they listen to, because I didn't like force them to not listen to it around me, or like never go to a school dance because I can't stand it, or whatever, get my kid, my phantom child that doesn't exist, headphones so I don't have to ever listen to it, right? I actually, was exposed to some of it. Was most of it miserable for me? Yeah, So then I would just watch the ones that are enjoying it so much and be like, look, that's their jam. That's it for them. And then it would make me feel like I felt about music when I was their age. And then we had that place to connect. Okay. And that's what I see being the light part of your shadow attribute of this, like, of your feelings towards getting older and, the way the elderly act, etc. and so forth. I feel like you are going to be one of those cooler older people that's more open-minded because you disliked being treated that way. And so when you see older people doing stuff that you don't like, I have so many mean older people comebacks that are respectful enough for elderly people to handle, but still understand that they're being kind of put in their place for not being a polite person, because just because you're elderly does not mean you just get to be impolite to everybody, and they just have to be like, yes ma'am, you're right, I should try harder. And not only that, I'll start listening to different music and just start thinking everything you thought was important is important, right? It just, I get it. I totally relate to this reading. But I'm like stumbling over my words so much because I don't want to offend anybody. I need to get over that. That's something I need to get over. My shadow attribute is I might say things that upset people. The good attribute of that is that sometimes when you're real and you say things that are real, it reaches people. And so that's something I need to work on with my shadow. So embrace yourself when they make you upset, come up with some comebacks for next time that are respectful enough for them, but still spicy enough that they might learn a lesson. And that's the other thing too. Older people need to understand that younger people teach us lessons too. And that's something that I actually did hold on to in my teaching career before I quit. Would I have been able to hang on to it forever up until it was like time to retire? I don't know, because the age gap was definitely happening, right? But I hadn't gotten to the point yet where I had started to feel like I had nothing to learn from them, that they had nothing insightful to say to me, right? And that's the part that I feel like elderly people miss out on, is that younger people have things to teach us too as we get older. And I feel like you are going to understand that, and you are going to actually be one of those older people that younger people come towards because you understand, because you make them feel comfortable, because you're not like the other ones. And here's the thing. I feel like it's gotten, as we get through each generation, each older generation is a little more accepting of the one right underneath them, right? They're not as strict as their parents, or the things that their parents thought were taboo, they might not think are as taboo, things like that. It's just the ebb and flow of like generations and how that stuff works as we move through a changing world. But part of that aspect of like things always changing is that means we're always going to have to learn. And so like elderly people have immense things to learn from the young. They also have to depend on the young to take care of them once they're older. And I'm one of those people, I'm trying not to have kids, right? I'm getting closer to that finish line of actually accomplishing that goal. Because like if if something happened and I woke up pregnant tomorrow, I would have the kid, but at the same time, it's like, I would not want to do that. And so my point with that is that a lot of people are like, oh, you don't have kids, who's going to take care of you? And it's like, well, people that are young enough to be my kids that just work in social services, man, probably. And in healthcare services. And like, I'm getting so old now that like a lot of, nurses and PAs and stuff like that are younger than me, And I'm okay with that because I didn't go to medical school as long as they have, right? So they have things they can teach me. I also appreciate that they're not as uptight as the older, healthcare givers were. So like, it's all a balance, of just figuring out, those younger people are the ones that are going to take care of your world when you're too old to take care of it yourself anymore. They're also the ones that are going to teach you about that world when it stops making sense. Because let me tell you, it doesn't make sense to me right now. How about any of my older friends here feeling about that? The older you get, the more confusing things become as far as like what's going on with the world. Because when you're little, they teach you it's going to be a certain way, and then by the time you get there, it's not that way anymore, right? I don't know if there's got to be a way we can fix that. I don't know if there is. So you are going to be a cool older person, and you're going to have lots of young people flock to you, and it's going to be enriching, I feel like. And that is what I have for group 2. So if this was helpful, tell me how in the comment section. You can give me topic ideas there as well. And if you'd like to book a private reading, there are ways to do so in the description box. We'll see you in the next one, my friends. Take care. Bye. Hello, group 3. So if you picked a little black and white stripy heart with the birthmark, let's figure out what your shadow wants to tell you. Silence, 36. There is a sweet embrace in the nothingness. Stillness brings a presence of self fully embodied. Okay. Oof, I feel like this is going to be a longer one, which is funny because the other two already bloated way beyond what I wanted them to be. I'm just a talker. What can I say? So if you're one of those people who are like, man, I wish those videos were longer, guess what? I'm the gal to come to. I just really wanted to talk that issue to death and, you know, maze it out into a million different little tangent topics that are flipping weird and I have no interest in. Then maybe I'm not the girl for you. That being said, silence, I feel like for some of you, there's those of you who your shadow aspect is that you stay silent. Okay. Possibly when you should, and I don't like to should on people, right? That was something somebody said to me. Don't should all over yourself. I love it so much because I was told by a very smart person a long time ago that should is a shaming word. And nobody needs to say it to anyone else for that matter, or mostly to themselves, right? Like, it's in your best interest to drink water. So probably it's good if you do it. But like even saying you should drink water, that's still very shaming. And, you know, I just don't like to drink anything really all day long. That's why I'm going to die. But anywho, I feel like you stay silent sometimes when maybe it's within your right to speak up. Maybe you stay silent because you don't want to say the wrong thing. Maybe you stay silent to avoid confrontation. Maybe you stay silent to spare feelings. Okay. And so the shadow attribute of that is like pretty self-explanatory. You're not speaking up enough for yourself, right? So that's the first group I'm getting. The next group that I'm getting with the shadow aspect is that you might be even currently giving someone silent treatment. You might just have that in general, that you're like, I don't want to talk to you ever again, and so I will not. Okay? You use silence as a way of communicating. All right? And so because you do that, the shadow aspect of that is that people can't communicate with you. They can't work stuff out with you because you're done, right? You're not saying anything. You know, you might be prone to block people. You might be prone to, you know, they come and they're like, we need to talk about this. And you just stare straight ahead and don't say anything. I've done that before. And so one group is like, you don't speak up, you know, maybe when it's in your best interest to, or when you had the right to. This side is like, you are silent as a statement. Okay. As like a conscious choice. And it's a conscious choice over here too, obvi, right? Just totally different scenarios. And then what's the other one? Oh, the third one is, that I'm picking up on, is that some of you just really like it to be quiet. Hang on. Well, that was interesting and probably a confirmation that you're in the right group. I just had to stop the video and go silence and noise. So for some of you, silence is super important. Good grief. Hang on, I'm adjusting my attitude. Anyway, you like things to be quiet. And if they're not, you might get loud to tell people to be quiet. That's something that I'm seeing as a shadow attribute. I also see it being like, if you're out in the world somewhere and people are being loud and ruckusy, even if it's like a happy ruckus, you're like, shut up, you know, like, I feel that about that third aspect of like, oh, another thing I feel like you are falling into in that category as well, and this might actually just be like a whole fourth category, is that some of you wish other people would be silent instead of speaking their opinions and their minds. It feels like that might really grate on you. I'm picturing somebody in a meeting right now, like a work meeting, where everybody's winding down. You've already been in there for way too long. It could have been an email anyway. And now they're like, okay, anybody have anything else you need to say? And that one person is like, yeah, can I bring up something that really has nothing to do with anyone else in the room? And I could have just walked up to the person in charge and asked them as everybody was filing out. But since we're all here stuck in our chairs and they still have to stay here, can you talk to me about this one thing that nobody else cares about? And you're over there like, oh my word, like I'm going to scream, right? And then you have to stay silent and suck it up while they waste your time being not silent. Okay. I also feel like that fourth element feels like a lot of people speak when they don't need to, that people overshare in general, like society wise. Like you don't like that people share their feelings so much. That like every person out there has to unpack their feelings and explain their motivations to everyone and justify why they feel the way they feel, right? And there's something about that is very good that we're going to talk about right now, just because otherwise I'll forget. And we'll work backwards to the other piles, I guess, or to the other groups in this. So the cool thing about that darker attribute is that you might be likely to like not overshare or like blatantly blurt things out that could cause damage. Okay. I think sometimes you might blurt if you get frustrated, right? In that fourth category. But you see other people, you know, in your opinion, talking out of turn a lot, right? Declaring, and like we see it on social media quite a bit where, you know, people are talking about different things and somebody's like, yeah, but for me it's this way, so F off all of you, you know, and this is how it is. It's like, yeah, that's how it is for you, Charlotte, not everyone else, right? And so it just feels like that actually is a good part of that, is that you aren't going to mince words. You aren't going to like make excuses. You aren't going to tolerate like, what do they call it when people like spin their words around to get people to come over to their side. They used to call it like spin, but now I'm old and they probably call it something else. Anyway, like it feels like a good thing in the sense that does get out of proportion. I think we can all agree, if we've ever been on social media or watched interviews on the street, that people have gotten very comfortable with like explaining how they feel about things. And that's all well and good, but sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes it's not the right time. Sometimes it's not the right words. Sometimes it's not the person's place to say something, you know, those types of deals. And I feel like the fourth category people, the light attribute of your shadow, of finding that people that you like, you're not going to overshare. You're not going to speak out of turn, probably. You're not going to say something you regret. Okay. See, now I already got to pause and go back and find out what I said before. For the third category of people that kind of went in with that fourth category of wanting silence, I feel like if you're the type that's just more like the noise pollution, the fourth category was more like the content of what's being said. This is more like just noise in general, people speaking too much, maybe people talking over each other, maybe people just laughing and having a good time. Like noise pollution is kind of what I'm feeling more, because you have a dislike for that to the point where you might even get kind of snippy with like, turn that down, you know, like kind of situation, right? I feel that you, because you appreciate that silence in general, that the light part that's going to help you with that shadow attribute is that you're just going to catch things that other people don't catch. It's going to make you more observant of what's going on. One of the things that more silent people notice that a lot of like very talkative like me people don't, is you read the rooms better. A lot of times like I'm still over there talking like, yeah, everything's fine, blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, all these people are like getting uncomfortable because I said one thing that like insulted somebody in that group greatly, and they're all aware of it except me because I'm just rambling on and on. Okay, I feel like you won't do that. I feel like because you're silent, it's actually a good survival skill in the sense that you are being more observant, more prone to seek out more quiet situations. So, like, that might be less likely for you to end up in, a crowded area where something, ruckusy violently can happen, right? Or uh, it could be that because you care for silence a lot more and you hear people start getting into like a heated discussion, you might be less likely to like get roped into that discussion and end up in some kind of a fight of some kind because you voiced your opinion too loud or whatever and everybody was voicing theirs as well and yum 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 yum, and then pretty soon everybody's mad at each other. I feel like that will help you avoid those situations as well. For the second people, these were the ones that use silence as a statement or maybe even as a weapon. Okay. I feel like the light attribute of that is not so much like, ignoring somebody to let them know that they're, in trouble, right? I would definitely say not to use it as a weapon, right? Or as a means to get what you want. But the light attribute of that kind of tendency is that silence speaks louder than words. And so sometimes your silence can teach somebody a really powerful lesson about what they did. And I feel like that is mainly the bulk of like the people that we have here is like not so much using it as a form of manipulation or, punishment, but using it as a form of keeping yourself centered and cutting away the people and the situations that don't serve you. Not arguing with fools, right? If somebody, is being passive aggressive with you and like saying insulting things and being like, ha, it's just a joke, ha, 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 ha. And instead of being like, I don't think it's funny and I think you should just go pee off over there, right? That they actually, there's a dignity in that silence of like, I'm not going to engage in this conversation with you, inappropriate person. Okay. So that's the good attribute of that silent category. What was the last one? The people that don't speak up as much. In your case, you kind of fly under the radar, scenario one. Sorry you had to wait all the way to the end of this for your scenario. Hopefully you skipped through the other three if you could. But you have this flying under the radar thing where people don't expect you to speak up. And so when you do, it could be very profound. Now, if you speak up and people are like, shut up, you, and you might want to look at like how much you're being quiet to the point where like maybe you've talked yourself into thinking that you don't have anything good to say. That's when you need to start really working on that, on making it more of a positive. Okay. So because you are more silent, I also see you being more open-minded because you do tend to be like, I don't know, maybe what I have to say isn't like not good enough, but maybe I don't know enough about this topic to say anything. Okay. We all do this. We all did it a lot in school for sure. Of like, maybe I shouldn't say the answer, even though I think I know what it is, because if I'm wrong, I'll feel silly. Maybe if I say something, it's going to make people upset with me, right? I feel like because you have that attribute, and I do feel like this group is one of the groups that, does need to work on things a little bit of like getting your voice out there. I feel like you will be able to, now that you know this about yourself, kind of discern between like when it's okay to stay silent, right? And when you need to speak up and when it's okay for you to speak up. It's always okay for you to speak up, right? As far as I'm concerned. It's just the matters of what are the consequences of speaking up? What are the consequences of staying silent? And so because you are so silent and contemplative and think that you're not just the one that automatically knows everything, that is a light attribute in the fact that you don't just see yourself as tippy top. A lot of people do walk, and it's such a fine line of like being the star of your own show and taking care of yourself first, like we need to for self-care, but then also acknowledging that you're not above anyone else is a balance that's pretty delicate. Okay. And so I feel like your light attribute of staying silent because you don't feel like you know everything all the time is true. But once you do know, then you say something. Okay. So your work could be figuring out when those situations are, which one is which. But the light attribute is that you're very open-minded and very accepting of other people's differing views from yours. You're also okay with, even though, I don't know, even though the office vote didn't go your way, during the staff meeting or whatever, you are okay with just staying silent and being like, well, that sucks for me, but since it works better for everyone else, I guess, I'll take the hit this time. But the main thing is to not take the hit every time to avoid saying something. Okay. And I think that's the balance that you're going to have to find. But the attribute of you staying silent because you don't feel like you know everything all 100% all the time, or that you feel like it's not your place to say something to someone, that has saved you a lot of like resentment from people, awkward moments with people. It saved you from making broad assumptions about something that you didn't have all the information on yet. And I think that's why you tend to stay silent sometimes, is because you're like, well, that one time I wasn't, and I was wrong, And so I feel like that is the main thing about your shadow attribute, and the main light aspect of that is that you are very open-minded and you see other people's views. The darker aspect of that is that you might forget about sticking up for yourself or speaking up for yourself. And so that's where you find that balance. All right. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please let me know how it was helpful in the comments section. If this was shorter than the first two videos, I'm going to laugh. Laugh with me. You can give me topic ideas there as well. If you would like a private reading, please do so anytime. You can look me up in the description box. I have lots of ways to get a hold of me. All right, we will see you in the next one, my friends. Take care. Bye. Hi, group 4. So if you picked the clear quartz and the graveyard card, let's look and see. Graveyard, there's a song that bellows in the piece of knowing no end in acknowledging the crossroads of eternity. Number 18, graveyard. Okay. I'm getting a twofer for this one too. So a couple of different scenarios are coming into my mind. One is that your shadow aspect is you are afraid of death. You're afraid of this life ending. You're afraid of it maybe ending for others that you care about. You could be afraid of it ending for yourself. You could be very afraid of both. Okay. And I'm just going to broadly say that fear of death can come in many different forms. Some people fear that there will be nothing on the other side. Some people fear that there will be and they'll be punished. Some people fear that they won't feel connected to anything, or that they won't feel at all, that they just won't exist, right? Some people fear that, and this was a huge fear of mine when I was younger. I would be the type back then that if I had been mortally wounded, I would have just crawled into a hole and died there rather than seeking help, because I wouldn't want anybody to see me like that. Because for me, the thing that was scariest about death was loss of dignity in some way. And the sad thing about that is that, in my opinion, there is no death with dignity. Okay. I feel like all death in a way has dignity, and all death in a way loses dignity. And it's just the nature of death. Same thing with birth. It's not like that baby's full of dignity when it comes out screaming its little nasty, gross. It's all wet and has people's insides all over it. And it's screaming. And in my opinion, it doesn't look so great because newborns look pretty rough as far as I'm concerned. Nothing looks more miserable to me than a newborn. And I'm not saying they're ugly. What I'm saying is they look miserable. They look unhappy to me. they can't even smile yet, they say. They like try to smile, they're like, it's gas. I'm like, oh, they don't have those feelings yet. This is what it's like to talk to a person that never had kids. I don't know what the hell I'm saying. But anyway, basically, that fear of like loss of dignity, of, the manner of death, right? It's not so much death itself. It's like the way you go is like, some ways are more upsetting than others, right? So that's the first camp. The second camp, shadow side, that I have here is that you might be kind of morbid. Okay. And it's so funny. I fit into both of those categories. I have total fear of death, at times. I'm getting better at it as I get older. Or I should say that the fear is leaving me as I get older. I'm not doing anything to make it go away. Excuse me, I'm yawning. That might be a message to somebody, but I don't know what it is. But you might be kind of morbid in this camp of like, morbid in every sense that a person can be morbid. I'm not saying that you're every bit that morbid. I'm saying if lots of people that are different are watching this, I feel different levels of what kind of morbid you are. Okay. I think that for some of you, it's almost like this laughing in the face of death, scenario, of embracing the death scenario, like maybe using it in decor, maybe, dressing in a way that looks morbid to people. Maybe it's like liking morbid content, which, we all know that so many of us, not all of us, but so many of us get addicted to true crime, right? Or to horror and scary stories. And, part of it's morbid fascination, part of it's making yourself feel safe because you're not in that situation while you're watching it happen to somebody else. And so, but this sense of morbidity, it also, and then the sense of being morbid in that, you're getting sad about it, like, everything just dies, That part is there as well. So let's look at the light attributes for the first group before I forget what they were even doing. They were the ones that were afraid of death in some way. The light attribute of that is you'll be more preserving of life, both your own and that of others. Okay. Because all life is sacred, in my opinion, and hopefully all life is sacred in a lot of opinions. It might not be, but I feel like life is probably sacred in all forms. And so it feels like that fear of death helps to create a light aspect of you preserving life. Like some of you might become a doctor or got into healthcare, because you wanted to, help save people from death. Some of you might have started becoming a medium so that you can prove that there's life after death. And you might not have gotten to that point of like what the light aspect is of your shadow in this respect, but that's why you're here, right? It could also be that you're just a great comfort to those who are grieving, because have you guys ever seen the two types of people? I'm sure you have, where, if someone they know is grieving, or if they're grieving themselves, they're like, ooh, not as important, or it's super important because it's happening to me, right? But if it happens to others, they might even get kind of callous, like, you should just get over it, like, just get over it and move on with your life. And that is something that, I feel could be a shadow for somebody that's watching this, of like, everything dies, move on. Like a hard-nosed, like, death is a part of life. You have to accept it and move forward. You can't let it drag you down. Okay. But that shadow attribute can often make that person not grieve properly, because we do have to grieve the things we lose to be healthy. Sorry, it's true. I mean, you don't have to, but you're going to maybe not heal as well. right? So, it's just like when you hurt your leg and you need to rest it, but instead you're like, nope, I'm going to push through it. And then the next thing you know, you need like knee replacement surgery. You can only power through so much, okay? For those of you that are afraid, I feel that you help ease the fear for others because you don't want them to feel that fear that you sometimes feel. You try to make it so that they don't feel that way, so that they can feel better. So you can be a great comfort in that light attribute of yours. You also find quality in life, in all life. And you're also a survivor in the sense that it's like, we only say one thing to death and it's not today. That was a quote from, started out pretty good and kind of ended weak. Was that Game of Thrones show? Kind of ended weak. I'd say it ended pretty bad. But anyway, a lot of people probably agree. Let me know if you agree in the comments. Just kidding. I don't debate. I don't care. Anyway, this idea of like all life is precious. All like, like you'd be laying on your deathbed in like racked in pain, and even your cancer has cancer, right? You're like, this sucks. But you don't ask for pain medication because you want your brain to stay sharp enough that you learn one more lesson for someone. You have one more thing you want to say, or I feel like that kind of fighting spirit of life to the last drop is definitely in that first category of being just life is precious. Okay. And then it's not so much as like death is scary. It's like life is precious and it's not here forever. And so we treat it like it's a precious thing. That is what I'm seeing for that first group. The next group that's a little bit, okay, let's talk about the hard-nosed people real quick. The ones that are like, death's a fact of life and move on. Okay. It's true. All right. But you do have to grieve to move on. And so because you have that shadow attribute of get over it. Yeah, suck it up. Just move on. Life goes on. You're not the one who died, Cheryl. That kind of deal. The reason that that's a light attribute is because you do remind people that they aren't dead too, right? You remind people that, there's still things to be done. You still have life to live. And we can't just lay down and give up, right? And so that attribute is that you can help people move on, okay? You might have to temper it a little bit and accept that grief is a part of that, right? But you would be like the type in the light attribute of that instead of shaming them and yelling at them to get over it and move on, you might be the type that goes to their house and says, hey, I get it. This sucks, but you need to clean up your house and I'm here to help you. Okay. I'm here to help you move on from that. I was thinking about that movie and it was also a book, P.S. I Love You, where they, she's holed up in her house for like 3 weeks and won't answer calls and won't talk to anybody. And she's just like wearing her husband's clothes and singing and watching sad romantic movies and talking to him and just, laying next to his little urn and just doing that whole deal. And they come in and they tough her out, and the mom says, if you want us to leave, that's fine, but this is going to have to stop eventually. You can't just keep doing this forever. And, she was more the hard-nosed one, whereas her other friend is more gentle about it. And it's like, of course life isn't fair, but, going crazy and just staying in your house until you die isn't a luxury the middle class get to have, right? You got to get up and move on. And so that's a light attribute of that personality that I really like. The other one was the morbid people, who I also like. You might make jokes about it, like laugh in the face of death, right? Laugh in the face of, we talked about like the humiliation aspect of dying, right? Of like the embarrassing things that happen when you pass, right? And how some people might find that to be like crass and disrespectful. But the light attribute of that is that what else can we do? We can't just like lose our sense of humor because we all die, right? And sometimes like humor and that kind of dealing can bring a lot of healing. If death comes with indignity, right, then we're all together in that. And maybe we can laugh about the embarrassing stuff a little bit, right? Or maybe we can laugh about just the chaos of passing, maybe we can find humor in the fact that we're all on this boat together and we're all going to end up in the same place. The other part is that morbid fascination. Some of you might be drawn to, even watching videos where, you see someone pass, okay? You might be morbidly fascinated. I'm not going to call out anybody that watches that stuff because you enjoy it so much. That's a different kind of deal. That's something you might want to go talk to somebody about if you're really enjoying it too much. But if you're just morbidly curious and you ended up watching some videos like maybe when you were younger or something, and it made you more morbidly curious to see what else is out there, that's a pretty dark shadow aspect. And the light attribute of that, because there always is one, okay, is that you end up knowing a lot about death and about what goes on with it. You stand to learn a lot from that because you're not flinching away from it in fear. You also learn a lot about yourself in the sense that you know what's out in the world. So it could make you more keen to what kind of dangers are out there for people. It could make you more keen on avoiding situations that could lead to somebody dying or could lead to you dying, right? And if you're able to do it in a respectful way, that looking at death, it can make you a good mouthpiece to be a person who brings voices to what you've seen, right? So if you're morbidly curious and you've seen a bunch of things, you might know now that you are able to be a person who could be like a mortician, we need them. Everybody dies and we need somebody to help us do stuff with, the remains. And while it used to be tradition that your family just dealt with it, now we have this, all this education and technology and the world has expanded so much that it's become like a business, which does seem kind of a little bit vulgar, right? But at the same time, they provide a lot of comfort to people with the way that they do things. Now, it depends on how, whatever your beliefs are and what they do with the dead, right? For some people, it's a great comfort to be able to see their loved one looking, made up and, just looking like they're sleeping and getting to see them one last time, right? For others, that might not be what they want to do. They might want to just see their photo, right? But the fact that there's somebody there that can make it to where everything's all taken care of and all you have to do is just have the photo and everything else got taken care of for you and you didn't have to look at all of that, that's a wonderful comfort, And so those of you that are morbidly curious, you have this light attribute of not being as afraid or grossed out or terrified to the point where you actually learn things about death that we wouldn't know if it wasn't for you. Okay? So I'm not saying to just keep watching those violent videos because you really, really like them. That's not what I'm saying. Not talking about that group. If that's what you're doing, you need to go talk to somebody. But if you're watching them because you're just curious and then you learn something and you carry that forward somehow, that's a little bit different. I'm trying to think of a good example. It doesn't make me sound crazy. I had a student that came to me one time and asked me if I had ever seen a video of a murder that was circulating around quite a bit. I won't say the name so that you don't go looking for it and accidentally watch something you don't want to watch. But it disturbed him. He wasn't watching it because he liked it, right? He watched it because he was curious and it disturbed him greatly. And so his first thing that he did was he came and found me and he said, don't watch this video. If you have somebody tell you should watch it, don't, because it's so terrible. And I don't want you to have to see that. And that was a light attribute, he, in a sense, didn't realize he was sacrificing his own well-being. But once he realized that he had witnessed something that was that disturbing, he was able to go and stop it from hurting somebody else. Because I am a curious person, and I know I'm not so curious that I'm ever going to watch a murder video, okay? Because I just I know for a fact that, A, it's a crime for watching it. B, it's like it's something that's going to affect me forever, and I don't want to see it. I also care about the people in the video. I wouldn't want somebody watching me go through that and laughing or not laughing or becoming disturbed or any of that. That goes into that dignity thing again. And so, and I think pretty much everybody feels the same way about that. Just some people, it might be more disturbing to them than others. But yeah, if some meaner kid, which I really, honestly, I have to be so honest and say that the students that I taught in the place that I was at were the best kids ever. Yes, nobody's perfect. And we had, some kids that had problems that were in a negative field. But for the most part, like, it wasn't the type of place where they would go around and be like, oh, Miss Miriam over there is very, very good at, liking our videos that we tell her about that are funny. Let's tell her about this one and just not tell her what it is, right? It was just not something that the kids would do there. Because they were kind of raised to see elders as people too, but they're also, what's the word? Like, not innocent, but just they were just more mindful than larger schools that I worked at, and even smaller schools I worked at weren't always like that. But I mean, I could see it happening in other places. I student taught in a place that was pretty rough. Like, those kids would put their hands on you. So I wouldn't put it past some of them to be like, hey, have you seen this video? And they give you a title, and like, they lulled you into a sense of security by showing you just like cute kitten memes, and you like go and look it up, and maybe you're even at work when you did it, and oh, look at this, it's a Murther video. Yay. And I have had kids, get disturbed by a video and show me because they were like, oh my gosh, look what happened. It was like an accident video. And then I 10 minutes into third period, I just watched somebody die. I'm like, whoa, kid, don't show that to people. But they were morbidly curious, right? So, that gave me the opportunity to tell them, hey, you can't do that. That might upset somebody very greatly. So that light attribute of if you're morbidly curious, you're going to learn things that the people that are too scared to look at it are going to learn. And, it's not about like just the morbid fascination of just getting to watch it happen, right? Or taking joy in that. It's about just being curious about the world, and you end up learning things, and I'm not just talking about watching Murther videos. I'm talking about like just morbidly fascinated by death in general. Okay. You might be morbidly fascinated, when you were a kid with like, you're out hunting and, the anatomy became interesting. Whereas like with me, once I saw hunting, the anatomy thing became very much like something I did not want to look at, like in anything. Okay. I don't want to see any like surgery videos. I don't want to see any of that stuff. And so I'm not going to become a surgeon while we need surgeons. And so that's the light attribute of your group. I think I got it all covered that time in not very fast fashion, but here we are. If this was helpful, let me know how in the comments section. Give me topic ideas there as well. And if you would like to book a private reading, there are ways to do so in the description box. We'll see you in the next one, my friends. Take care. Bye.